Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are, of course, your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. Thank you ever so much for tuning in, for downloading, for listening across all the world. Listening to us for the very, very first time. You, of course, can find us on iTunes. We're on Spotify. We're across all major audio platforms. We're, of course, on X. We're on Facebook. And we are on Blue Sky too. Before I bring in the wonderful journalists who've got joining us alongside me, back with home comforts, I've got the wonderful Jim from Spurs. Jim, how are you? Lovely to see you.
Doing very well, thanks, Ricky. And yeah, good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you're joining from. Yeah, looking forward to tonight.
Amen, most certainly. I know when people are going to chuckle when I say this is a summer transfer window update. It is a summer transfer window update. Please don't, in any way kind of scratch your eyes. If you even want to scratch your eyes, that can be quite painful. There, of course, still is 39 days left of this summer transfer window for listeners on audio. I think we're at the magic day number 40. These are becoming daily at the moment. But we'd like to have one man who I think a lot of people do have a sense of reliability on whenever this man does talk about all things Tottenham, because he's got a proven track record of always giving us some great information over the years. We've got the wonderful Mike McGrath back from Telegraph Sport. Mike, lovely to have you here. How are you? Oh, we haven't spoken since Bilbao. Can't believe it.
Yeah, gee, that seems like a while ago, that one. Yeah, no, I'm good, Ricky. It's good to be on. Good to meet Jim. And I actually it's so long ago since I've been on. Since you must have got bigger and bigger, because I got a text from one of my mates with a selfie with you, Ricky. So there you go. Yeah.
Really? God, yeah, is he okay? Oh, bless him. Bless his heart. Yeah. I must have slipped him a tenner without me even knowing, Mike. I tell you, I must have slipped him some money. Bless his heart. How very kind is that? How lovely to hear is that? Listen, of course, we know at the moment with regards to Spurs, something that's gone very quiet in these last few days. I know there's this kind of situation around the Morgan Gibbs White, if you want to call it saga, that we'll try and touch upon, Mike. And again, like I say, we've not had you here since the change of manager, which people shouldn't laugh, because it feels like whenever we get you wonderful astute journalists join us, there's always something that's changing at Tottenham. So in the nature of things changing, let me hand over and give you a change rather than me take the mic to begin with. Let me hand over to the wonderful Jim from Spurs to kick off this edition of Last Word on Spurs. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for us. Share this out to a wide range of Spurs audience. Jim, I will hand the stage to you.
Yeah, good evening, Mike. Look, you said it yourself. The last time you were on, Spurs weren't European champions. Yeah, I'm going to keep calling us European champions just to kind of wind up other fans from other clubs. But what did you make of it, covering the whole kind of era of Spurs, going from winning a trophy to moving on from Ange Postecoglou to appointing Thomas Frank? Do you think they've made the right decision with that as well? What's your thoughts on the whole process that we went through there?
Well, if I could talk kind of from the heart first, I would say that it was really, really sad to see him go, because, I've told neither of you this, but my son's a big Spurs fan. He's 8 years old. I had a decision to make whether to take him out of school and go to Bilbao, which was kiboshed by my wife. So that wasn't going to happen. So we had Spanish night in Sheffield, where I live. We had tapas, so we brought Bilbao to Sheffield. But anyway, that's a long way of saying that, Big Ange was kind of responsible for, absolutely one of the most memorable nights that we've had as football fans. So I felt very, very, very sad to see him go, despite his kind of league record. And I think Spurs fans will remember him as well for bringing the trophy drought to an end, and those memories, which are absolutely priceless, and people that travelled there or watched it at the stadium or watched it in their homes like me, I think will have a great debt to Big Ange. So I thought it was really sad. But then you get to the kind of cold light of day, which is, we reported before the final. Matt Law was reporting it for the Telegraph that his future didn't decide or wasn't dependent on this result in Bilbao. And then we were getting stronger, and we were getting our sources who we were talking to in that lag period between the final and when he finally went were, if anything, getting stronger on that view. And I thought the Telegraph, we covered it really well from the final through to that final week. And then I was working with Matt. We were covering England in it wasn't in Andorra. They were playing Andorra in Barcelona when Matt broke that story, and it was just really busy. It was a hectic time. And what did I make of it all? I was expecting it. And maybe sometimes when you're a reporter, also you're hopeful for it because you're reporting on something that you're saying is going to happen. You're expecting it as well, and when it does, on nights like that, it was a night, or like when Mourinho was sacked. I remember it was a Monday. Kind of, the brown stuff hits the fan as a journalist, and you just non-stop for that day until your paper goes away, and it's exciting. It's kind of what you're in it for as well.
Yeah, I mean, it has been, as always, Mike, in the world of Spurs, a bit of a soap opera. There's never really a dull moment, is there, at Tottenham? As fans, we are always living without really knowing what comes next. I was away for 2 weeks in Greece where I had some really quality family time. Jim, bless him, was here looking after us as he has been recently for us on the show. And with that, obviously, we're going to come on to it soon. The nature of Spurs in the market, you just don't quite know what to ever expect. I had that kind of 2 week period away where they signed Kudus, and then that next 24 hours proceeded where they look like we're going to tie up Gibbs White very, very quickly. We're going to come on to that very, very shortly. But I just think that's a prime example of kind of never knowing what's around the corner with Tottenham. I just don't know many clubs like Spurs. I have to ask you, Mike, as someone that covers not just Spurs, but a lot of clubs in general, what are Tottenham like to cover for you personally?
Pretty, exciting. It is really exciting. If you just look at, say, the manager itself, there was Marco Silva linked with it. Iraola, we know everybody likes him, but there was also Thomas Frank in the background who, wasn't a real Daniel Levy type of person you would have thought, type of manager if you were looking at it last season, but things made sense as well. And that sense of excitement and change is something that you always see at Spurs. I think down the years covering them, from the early days, I think they've always been quite an opportunistic team, opportunistic kind of recruitment team in the market. They were, I think, right from, when Levy was there, right from when it was like Van der Vaart, that was really late, I think. And they would try for things that they would also miss out on, like Willian. I'm going way back now. Try for, I think it was Luis Diaz was the one that they missed out on. Well, they're quite opportunistic like that, which creates excitement, and it creates a lot of work as well. And you get things. They don't really go down a particular set path with transfers.
Yep.
And it can be really exciting. You can get some great stories as well, which people have even this summer with signing somebody from West Ham, which I don't think has happened for a long time.
No,
they don't sign people from Chelsea, but who knows with their new regime, things. So it's constantly changing, and the staff is changing as well all the time. And I'm kind of speaking to you off air a little bit about it. Staff changes, so sources change, and kind of the way you operate changes. So it's everybody's always adapting. and then the coverage changes as well. You go from beleaguered fans that are 15th in the table to, as you said, Jim, European champions. So there is never a dull moment. I would say for a team that until recently weren't in the top four regularly, weren't in the Champions League regularly, they command a lot of column inches and news, on Sky Sports News and broadcasting. They command quite a lot of news coverage, despite not winning as much as other teams, which kind of speaks for the interest of Spurs and kind of maybe the size of the club in terms of the interest in what they do and how they operate.
You know what? I know Jim is keen to come back, and he's going to come back in literally in just a second. I know he's going to probably ask you around the fact of what you've made of the nature of our window so far, in terms of maybe the fact other clubs have been fairly busy, and I know there is a feeling around the Spurs community that there's a concern maybe around other clubs strengthening. But I just wanted to ask you quickly of what you've made of the business Spurs have done so far, Mike. I mean, you kind of briefly touched upon the fact there's been some internal changes in terms of the reshuffling at board level. But of course, we have seen, as you touched upon there, Kudus come in for what we're led to believe is a fee of around 55 million from a club that Spurs don't normally do business with in terms of West Ham. I think you have to go back to that transfer of Scott Parker, which is over a decade ago, since the last time the two clubs did do any form of business. We've also seen the young Japanese central defender, who by all accounts is known and is expected to be potentially a really good player in the near future, and that's Kota Sakai. That was also done. We do know at the moment that I think for some out there, they feel this is maybe holding up Spurs in the transfer market. Of course, this is this kind of on-off potential move over Morgan Gibbs White, which we understand at the moment is potentially down a legal avenue, which again restricts really what information you may be able to get out of the two clubs, and especially maybe what you can learn behind the scenes, Mike. Before we come on to Gibbs White in general, what have you made overall of the business Spurs have done so far during this summer window?
Yeah, they haven't been the most busy team in the Premier League. They haven't been signing, rebuilding like Sunderland or doing their business early like Man City were. But I think that, firstly, I think Frank coming in, from what I'm hearing, I think he'll be developing some young players as well. I think that was a huge pull for what he brings to the club, is that he'll work with young players. I wouldn't be surprised to see some players come through from the 23s upwards. But I do think that I think Kudus is a really, really exciting signing. I covered Man City quite a lot actually, and I always thought, he's not the type of pet player in terms of the type of player that he'd sign, but I always thought they'd be that kind of exciting Man City player. Maybe they went for Marmoush instead. I think it's a real coup to get Kudus the way they have. I think he'll be a real. I genuinely think he's the type of player that would fit really well in any kind of top four team. So I think that's really exciting from that point of view. I think there's still work to be done. Morgan Gibbs White, as I said earlier, opportunistic. Man City went for something different in the market. They obviously looked at Gibbs White last season, and Spurs went for it, and that for the reasons that you've kind of outlaid, it's now in limbo. We don't know which way it's going to go, but it did show some intent there from Spurs to get some business done. They're certainly not dormant at this moment in time. They're certainly doing things. Mark Gay's been discussed and reported on recently, and long term even. While they're not, signing, got the picture of the 7 players like when they spent the bail money all in one row. It's still they are working towards working towards having a positive end to the window. I would imagine that they do some more business.
When you cover, you probably have a fairer perception than us, right, Mike? Because you cover multiple clubs, you have peers covering it, and you can all kind of talk about it more objectively. It's very easy for us as fans, Spurs fans, like we focus very much on ourselves. We go, right, we need that winger, we need the number 6, we need the left back. And you don't think that the other clubs are all thinking, well, we need 3, 4, 5 players as well. And everyone's trying to move forward at velocity, and everyone in the Premier League is, because there's so much money around it, that often actually moving forward is relative to your competition standing still. I guess from your view, what I'm interested to know is, like, do you get the impression we are trying to do enough business this window where we're looking to kind of, well, not trying to, of course we're trying to. I guess the right way of looking at it is, do you feel we've got the appetite this window to do enough that moves Spurs closer to their rivals? Like, do we seem as busy as those clubs, or do we seem, like we're trying to get our bits done, but maybe not quite as competitively as others that you follow? If you could give us a bit of a comparison, I guess.
I don't think that they're the slowest in the mind. There's definitely conversations being had in key areas. I know you're going to ask me later how many I reckon they're going to start. I won't have to think about that one before I answer later in the programme. But they're definitely not the slowest by any stretch. In general, not just Spurs, what I am finding an increasing trend in the market is the use of a short list of, say, 3, 4 players, and then working through the list, going from 1 down to 2, and then that one goes, and then the next one goes, and then
Mike goes.
Then the player might be fourth on the list or whatever. It just takes time, I think, it takes time, that process, to get the business done.
Yeah, I mean, just touching on that point that Jim has mentioned, I think it's a really important point, because I know at the moment, when you look at maybe what Spurs have done in comparison to other clubs, and I know, again, as you said there, Mike, with the way football is and the world that we live in now, a lot of it does feel like, with football in general, it's played out a lot through social media. And, whether that's kind of the new trend or whether that's always going to be the way, I think, that's what people seem to look at now as being the barometer for what you've done so far as having a successful window. But again, we know there's a situation around Gibbs White, which we're going to come on to very, very soon. But at the moment, when you look at the fact, I think Liverpool have spent upwards of 200 million. They've bought Frimpong through, they've bought Wirtz, 𝐁𝐾𝐬, you look at the likes of City that have spent upwards over of 100 million. 𝐼𝐸, Cherki, Rendiz has come through. Chelsea have brought the Lap in. They brought João Pedro in. You look at United, who again we beat, can I just say, and obviously, of course, just a reminder, if you don't remember, we beat them, of course, in Bilbao to win the Europa League final. They've gone along and signed Cunha. They've got Mbeumo over the line. We've got our neighbours, who I don't like to bring up on this show. They've done Zubimendi, Madueke, Gyökeres. Looks now it's very, very close, if not done, to be honest with you. When Daniel Levy comes out and says on the points, Mike, that for the club, his recent interview, which is a rare one from Daniel Levy, we know he doesn't do many, he said, it's not enough in terms of what we're looking for. We haven't done what we want to do in terms of we want to win the league. We want to win the Champions League. We want to win. I want to know from you, I mean, do you look at this window being a window where Tottenham have got that ambition in this particular window of trying to be a club that is looking to try and win the Premier League, trying to win the Champions League? Because let's be honest about this, us fans didn't set that expectation, and those words didn't leave our mouths. They left the chairman's mouth. So is he putting himself under pressure by suggesting that is the target? And I mean, maybe we shouldn't be suggesting that target is for this season. Is that more of a longer term, do you think, Mike?
I think it has to be long term. I mean, you can't. I don't think any. Well, Leicester might have done it. They might have been close to that jump to go to champions, but that was obviously a one-off. I think Levy's quite just very, very, very circumspect in the market. And that's not a bad thing either. I think City lived by those principles for a long, long time, and it paid dividends. They would never ever overpay on what they thought, and they missed out on Maguire or Alexis Sanchez, and they were happy to walk away from that So I think it's difficult to Levy wants them obviously to be Premier League winners, like everybody else wants to be Premier League winners. I think next season, to get into the knockout stages of the Champions League is one realistic, but I think would also be would be good to prolong the season in Europe to February, and to dare I say it, top 10, top 8 stability. That's improvement, and that might not be what everybody wants to hear, but I would still see that as kind of a building block for Thomas Frank.
Yeah, no, I do agree on that. I think what we might suggest is just for your benefit. I think your camera has frozen us in typical Tottenham fashion in a transfer window. We're frozen, Mike. We're frozen. You're frozen. I don't know if you want to. We can still hear you, but you are frozen on our screens. I don't know if you want to quickly come back out and come back in, Mike, and we can let you do it for a couple of seconds if you want to do it. Yeah, obviously, I'll pick up with Jim whilst we're doing that. I mean, Jim, we've said, haven't we? I know, just to go back, because we can see a reflection. A lot of the people that are watching this show live, there is a degree at the moment of, that frustration that I spoke about with Mike. And I think the key thing, Mike, we've got you back now, glowing away there. This is the thing at the moment where I know a lot of people were hopeful on the back of some suggestions, not all suggestions, Mike, and it'd be keen to get your take on this, that there were some suggestions with Daniel Levy that there are these reports out there that there's going to be potential investment coming into the club. There was also suggestions that there's a large sponsorship deal in the offing. There's been, again, as we've touched upon, those changes at board level. Vinay coming in, which I'm sure Jim's going to touch upon you in a second. But I just wonder from your perspective, Mike, is much going to really change at Tottenham if Daniel Levy does take what is being reported? It's not factual at the moment. Maybe a different or reduced role. And I'd be keen to have you've heard anything along those lines, Mike, from your end.
My personal view is I think Daniel Levy would find it very difficult to have any kind of reduced role, because I think just from what I hear, that he's that job is kind of him, his identity and what he does for the club in terms of negotiating and being such a hands-on chairman rather than having other people do that kind of work. I would see him as entrenched in that job. In terms of investment, it's difficult because you hear about takeovers and you hear about possible investors as well. Personally, I have heard of a kind of American consortium who've got football clubs and other sport clubs as well, who have shown interest in investment. With these type of deals, I think it's always I'm always wary of them, because until the announcement happens, you can never say it's done. I think Roman Abramovich was the classic one where he just did the deal. He just wanted Chelsea. First thing we knew about it was him, unveiling himself as the owner at Stamford Bridge. So I am wary about these stories, but obviously we've also covered the naming rights as well, and it is I think it's a real valuable ticket for Spurs. I think with the concerts that they've had and the other sporting events there, Beyonce being there this summer, I think it is a real asset, and will eventually go for the right price. I think there are several interested parties in doing a deal, and I think it's a good deal for a sponsor as well, because it's known as the Emirates or the Reebok in the old days at Bolton.
Or the car leasing stadium, which we've just come off the back of playing.
Exactly, yeah. It does, it is, you pay for that exposure. And I think with Spurs, because it doesn't really roll off the tongue, the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, to me, when you're writing it or if you're saying it, I think it does need a name, or just call it White Hart Lane, I suppose.
Anything but the car leasing stadium, Mike, for me. God, Gibbs, sorry to cut in.
My understanding was as well, we'd deliberately chosen the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and not White Hart Lane to kind of make it a little bit more appealing to a sponsor. Because if you go straight in with the White Hart Lane branding, you almost label the stadium yourself ahead of a sponsor. That kind of takes a little bit away. Yeah. Whereas the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium doesn't roll off the tongue, like you say. So it's Spurs. It is literally Tottenham Hotspur. So you kind of give the fans what they want, whilst also not making something so sticky that a sponsor would be going, there's no point because everyone's just going to call it the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium anyway.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
But kind of leading into the commercial side, we spoke about it a bit earlier and you mentioned it before we went live as well. Like Spurs have been busy in other areas. It's not just the transfers. It's in the backroom stuff. We've probably had a bigger overhaul than any other team I can think of in the top half of the Premier League personnel wise. And in terms of senior executive kind of positions, Vinai was the main appointment that we look at. I think we all as Spurs fans were going, great, regardless of what your opinion is of our current leadership, if you like Levy or you don't, whatever, that's up to you. I think most people feel having someone who comes from the football background and has a history of running a football club and making football decisions that have had more hits and misses over a period of time, in Vinai being that kind of example, would only strengthen us to bring them in and have them involved with the top decisions, the major decisions that maybe we've heard that Levy makes himself predominantly in the past, made himself in the past, obviously with some advisors as well. But do you see the Vinai appointment changing much for us? Do you see it as something that's going to positively impact Spurs, or what do you kind of make of that appointment?
I think he will be a positive appointment. I mean, I think you got to take away where he came from in terms of previous clubs, and what I do know about him is a very personable character, somebody that people get on with. He's on the Premier League board, so in that way connected, very well connected, and I think he's got big commercial strengths as well. And also I think an important thing will be him liaising with fans. I think that will be part of the process if it isn't already. There is a degree of him being a kind of football facing person, that he'll be a football person. But I still see like the strengths being like commercial and other areas. Why he will be involved in those decisions, football decisions. So I still see Daniel Levy being in control and still somebody who would possibly take advice from Paratici. Now his ban's over. Don't think that'd be. I don't think that's completely over that relationship. So I don't think it would change the way Daniel operates or the way Tottenham operate in that way. But still, I do think he'll bring I think he's a very strong appointment in general for Spurs, and I think he'll do well there.
Okay. Just for Ricky, I like the idea. I have this weird kind of image in my head of Vinai walking into Dan's office and he's there on the iPad. What are you doing, Dan? What are you doing? Who are you ordering? And he's like, I just found another right back. Let's go for a little walk and talk about this one just before you pull the trigger on that one this time. I kind of like the idea that Paratici and Vinai are kind of a soundboard to decisions, and it's a three-way kind of conversation. Anyway, that's just my imagination running a little bit left field there, Ricky. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Not a problem at all. Look, if it results in Jim, we're getting Gibbs White on the line, I think everyone will be happy with that analogy, and they want that to run through the summer. Look, I think that's where we are going to probably turn our attention to next. I know many are craving, feasting, starving in terms of transfer news and players coming in. We're going to go for our first break of this show. For our listeners and audio, we've got over nearly 5,500 that are watching the show live. Again, thank you ever so much for all your incredible support for Last Word on Spurs. I'm joined by my co-host of Jim over at 𝐂𝐸 Spurs. We urge you, please, if you haven't already, please go and check out the wonderful content Jim has got over at 𝐂𝐸 Spurs. They've got some wonderful coaches that come on the show. They've got financial analysts that go on there. Some really, really good niche, I would say, shows that I don't think get anywhere near the coverage they should. So please go over there. Please go and check out the wonderful work Jim is doing at 𝐂𝐸 Spurs. Some great, great content. And yeah, it's great to see. I just got to say, Jim, the growth, because it's certainly not grim. It's brilliant, Jim, to see that growth that is going on over at your platform. So well done to you. And we're joined by a brilliant football reporter, journalist, Mike McGrath, on this edition of Last Word on Spurs. A little bit of housekeeping before we bring Mike back in. That we're delighted once again to be up for the nominations for the Football Content Awards for 2025. If you are trying to enjoy Last Word on Spurs, can I just say, guys, I know everyone is absolutely at the moment really wants, of course, Spurs to be getting more signings over the line. And look, we would love on here, as you guys know from me being back from my holiday, to be sitting here talking about more signings. So, look, if you can support the show in any way, hit that QR code, follow the episode description link to vote for us. That'll be great. And a reminder, Champions League nights are returning to Tottenham Hotspur, away and at home. And for you that are going to be going away, for a lot of fans that do check out this show and are going away from home, we, of course, have teamed up once again with NordVPN's baby 𝐂𝐸. They're an affordable eSIM for data for international travel. It means it allows you to save from some of the, hope I'm saying this, some of the scandalous costs you can take using your current mobile phone data. Go and check out 𝐂𝐸. You can hit that QR code. You get 15% off at first purchase. Right, we're going to turn our attention to where Tottenham are in the market. And we know right now that all of the conversation, Mike, is around Morgan Gibbs White and really what comes next. And I'm going to just say, as we go through this situation, we do appreciate this is now potentially a legal matter, which will restrict in terms of what we maybe can and can't ask you. But, just to bring everybody up to date in terms of what we know is factual, Gibbs White was not on the plane for Forest, who departed on Monday for their pre-season tour of Portugal, with games respectively against Fulham and Estoril Praia on the horizon. And the reason for his absence was not believed to be transfer or football related, and instead was a private matter that the midfielder had communicated to his club. Now, we know the previous day to his pregnant fiancée, influencer Brittany de Villiers, had shared a photo to her followers on Instagram from a hospital bed while speaking about the stress and difficulties involved with the high-risk pregnancy she is currently going through. And I think, again, makes us realise at the moment here, there's a lot happening in the life of Morgan Gibbs White. It's not just a potential transfer. There's a new baby on the horizon. The fact that it's a high-risk pregnancy as well. But I'm sure any of the parents that are out there that listen and watch Last Word on Spurs, everyone will know the concern that you have at the time of when you are, having or in the process of a baby coming into the world. It's never an easy time. It's a stressful time. And on top of that, there's this potential £60 million move that is impending at the moment. And there is this feeling around the case that there's a shrouded doubt about it, because I'll let you fill us in, Mike, from what you understand to be the latest in this, what feels like a saga for Gibbs White, because of maybe the lack of information we're getting, which then allows really noise to fill that vacuum. Is that fair?
Yeah, there is a vacuum because, like you say, it is a saga. I think it's 2 weeks now, believe it or not, since kind of the bid went in that afternoon, and it was and kind of everything snowballed from there over the next kind of 24, 48 hours. So look, what can you say really definitively is that Spurs want the player. And they wanted enough to make a bid for him, and that Forest are clearly upset at the processes that have that led to the bid. So I can see it rumbling on because of what you said about there's stuff going on off the pitch, which makes me think that it's not going to be done overnight, and it is going to drag on a bit. And I personally, I couldn't say which way it would go either. I think it's been widely, it's been widely reported they clearly want him to stay, Forest, and be part of their European campaign next season after he played such an important role in getting them there. But Spurs also, that they clearly like him as well and are willing to pay a certain price or maybe even more for him. We don't know. So So in that respect, it's a bit of a standoff until talks open again, and we can, and then there might be a deal to be done, because like I say, at the moment it really could go either way.
Can I ask? I know Jim's going to probably come in as well, because again, this is a subject which I know appreciate. There's just a lot of question marks, Mike, around what has happened to get to this process. And I appreciate for you as a journalist that's coming on the show, and it's a live show, got to say as well, I know there's an element of restriction as to what probably you can say and what you've got to say in terms of picking your words carefully, given that it does appear to be a legal process now involved. And I mean, it all just surrounds the fact, Mike, of just how quickly at the start it all kind of happened. The fact that Spurs moved very quickly from tying up Mohamed Kudus, and then obviously the following day, or I think it was even hours after that, they triggered what we were led to believe was going to be the release clause from Morgan Gibbs White. And what is obviously shrouding this move by now an element of doubt is how that release clause was triggered and by how that information was found out. And I suppose for someone like you that is so well connected in the world of football and with agents, players as well, if you don't mind me saying that, is this a very unique situation for you personally to be seeing this saga like this? I mean, is it something you're aware of? Because, I mean, it feels that this release clause wasn't public, and therefore it feels that one of the parties, there must have been someone maybe to have leaked that. Is that fair for me to suggest that? I don't know. I mean, is there anything you can tell us around release clauses and how this has come to where it's got to?
I mean, that's obviously the dispute is how is how it was made known. That's what Forest, part of the reasons why Forest are upset, which is kind of been reported. That's the complaint. I think it's getting, there is obviously the school of thought that if there is a release clause, what is the point of a release clause if it's not public? Because it's there for somebody to meet that price, that set price, and then be allowed to talk to the player. However, there is, there has been, and it's not like Spain. So in Spain, I think everybody knows the release clause of I think it's published what everybody's release clause is in La Liga. And it's not like that. Now, if I remember back to when Manchester City bought Jack Grealish, there was absolutely, I don't think that there was a definitive knowledge of that release clause until Christian Perslow said it publicly. That's from me, from memory. So in terms of that, I think clubs are very protective over what's in the contracts of their players in general. And you've seen, and if it is a favourable release clause for a player or a buying club, then I suppose that is extremely valuable information. I've got to say, before that day, I didn't know Gibbs White had before I saw it, read it myself. I didn't know he had a release clause. So, but obviously now we do. But it's a strange, not a strange concept, but it's a concept that can work in favour of the player as well, and a favourable buyout for them, I think, in a contract would obviously be a persuading factor in them signing a new contract at the club and committing their future.
Mm. And it's because my understanding is, once a confidentiality clause is in a contract somewhere, if any information comes out about that contract, if you want to push on it and demand that an investigation or if things are paused until you get clarity over whether the contract was broken or not by someone somewhere, you're within your right to do so. But in most cases, clubs are typically going, well, we'll compromise on a bigger price and I'll turn a blind eye, or what's the point in trying to stop a player who's desperate to leave? But I guess with this one, Gibbs White is kind of, when we say it before, Spurs fans, like, you'd rather be targeting a player who shows their true self, which is, I'm going to be a professional for my current club, and that's up to the hierarchy to to figure this out. If they want to sell me, they can sell me. If they want to push to keep me, I'll do what I can in a Forest shirt. And as fans, I think what hurt so much with this one was you got the here we go, you get the it's happening. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like someone giving you a present and then just before you're about to unwrap it saying, actually, not yet. I got the dates wrong, and taking it away. Like, really? I just shook it. I know what's inside. It's exactly the one I wanted.
It's quite interesting. The point Jim says there, Mike. I don't want to get your just take on it. Is that there was that feeling with Mohamed Kudus that he really, really pushed for that move to Tottenham. I mean, even Tottenham have got very obviously clever what they do now with their social media when it's announcing a signing. The fact that I only wanted Tottenham, there was a song even for him when he came in. Gibbs White, I think, as you know, and I think you've reported as well, he's remained very professional throughout this period. He's, trained every day with Forest. He's, gone back on time when it comes to pre-season training. Just how much of an element as well it's difficult to, again, it's a legal matter ongoing. I really appreciate that. Again, it's difficult to maybe go into massive detail on this, but how much maybe will this require, if it is a case, Gibbs White to push for the move? Because there are those suggestions that they've been trying to negotiate the contract extension for over, I think, the last 12, 18 months without any real significant breakthrough with Morgan. I think they were trying to make him, and you probably know better than me, one of their highest paid players, arguably in their history. That hasn't really come to fruition. But the fact the player has remained professional, is that also maybe not helping Tottenham's cause? And what I mean by that is that, players that sometimes are a bit more pushy and do kind of make their feelings clear they want the move. Would that in any way maybe help in this scenario, maybe without even knowing the legal implications that are happening in the background?
Well, that what you just described there does happen a lot from my experience, that sometimes the players need to make it clear to their clubs that they want to move, that they would like to move, or that they really going to kick off if they're not going to move. That happens throughout football, and I've experienced that myself in terms of some of the stuff that I've covered. You have somebody like Marcus Rashford who has made it so clear that he wants to join Barcelona. He's done interviews, travelled to Spain for training, and says he wants to play with Lamine Yamal. So yeah, he's agitated for a move there. I think that's a really different kind of a different scenario to Gibbs White. I think with Rashford, he was frozen out at Man United by Ruben Amorim, training on his own at some stages last season. So it's he's kind of agitated to where he wants to go. I think with Gibbs White, there is a possibility that he stays. So I don't think you can burn bridges that way. And I also, just from covering a little bit of England and Forest as well, I think character-wise, in terms of Forest players kicking off, I don't think he's going down the Van Hooijdonk route of refusing, going on strike or anything like that. I think he's a real professional player, and like a lot of this is like you said, it'd be I get on with the football, and then what happens is between the clubs. I would be pretty certain that that's the type of character he is, rather than somebody to kick off majorly.
Just a final one from me, Def. Jimmy, you've got any more to say on the debate about the player? I mean, I also, as I said kind of in my intro to you about the situation that we're in, Mike, I just wonder how much right now the player does need just a sense of stability. His wife is heavily pregnant, going through what appears to be, as has been reported, quite a high-risk pregnancy. The fact that he's also potentially moving, and it's not like he's moving around the corner, he's moving from Nottingham to London. It's quite a big change in his career. At a time when you're having a child and what's going on there, you'd argue that you do need that sense of stability, maybe career-wise. I mean, how much could that also impact the move? I suppose it's difficult to know, but I mean, just not easy, is it? I mean, with all the moving parts, it's quite a complex scenario that we're in here with this player.
Yeah, I think that element of deals really doesn't get focused on enough. Actually, there's a lot of players that I know it's properly first world problems, but would say they played when Swansea were in the Premier League. You move to Swansea, but your family and they're all going to school 3 hours away, and you get back from an away game, and then you have to go back home because you've got to see the kids and all that. These things all do come into play when it comes down to where you're going to play, and I think it sometimes gets overlooked. And players sometimes don't want to leave clubs because of the stability they have in a certain city and what their family are going through. So I think it's right to have that kind of on the table as something that people think about. But then again, I think Nottingham's not too far. That's not the worst trip in the world from kind of on that East Midlands line. I don't think I think there's much worse trips than that.
I'm sure he could afford a chauffeur as well every day if he needed to. But it's one of those things. I think if you put yourself in the player's shoes for a second and forget they're a footballer, it's like if my wife was going through something like that, I think most of us would be consulting with that, like consulting with them makes them sound like they're some kind of employee, but you know what I mean? Like that you'd be talking with your wife all the time about, are you sure you're comfortable with this? Is this going to make, you're a part of the decision? And we don't know what those conversations are going to be like behind the scenes. They're completely private. And I hope we have the integrity as a club. And I think we've shown at times we do have that integrity to respect what's best for people. Even when Conte had his challenges, Spurs were quite happy to give him time off work, try support him, with his personal life and not make it all about the job. I like to think we'd give a player like Gibbs White that respect as well, to say, you know what, if this is just terrible timing around everything right now, let's back off. There's loads of other things we can get busy on this transfer window right now. Let's go focus on that. And we'll evaluate things as when the time's perhaps a bit more of a stable time to have that conversation. Maybe that's could be going on, right, Mike? Or was it? So, yeah. Go on, Ricky, sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, I think you said earlier, Mike, your gut feeling on it. Do you have like a gut feeling on it for you, Mike, on this? Do you have a gut feeling?
My gut feeling is my gut feeling is that he'll be a Spurs player. That's my gut feeling, not based on information or anything like that. That's just my gut feeling, just in the terms that they have made an approach already, so they clearly want him.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that things can get negotiated. If there is some kind of negotiation, people pay more over longer time, shorter, under all at once, or whatever. If there is some form of kind of negotiation or leeway that in terms of getting around the table, then my gut feeling is that it's clear that it's something that Spurs want to happen.
Okay. Well, listen, we shall wait and see. I know that's probably not the answer that everybody wants. I know everyone wants clarity as to what's going on, but yeah, we all hope, Mike, bless you, you're right. And I know, again, it's difficult to comment on a situation where, with all due respect, there's a legal doubt, a legal case surrounding it now. So we will see. We are going to move on. Jim, let me hand back the mic to you if you don't mind.
Yeah, the other name, it's not all about Gibbs White. Spurs need a number 6. We've been asking for one for quite a while now. Palhinha is the name that seems to have the most concrete links to it because of his contract situation, his age, and openly Bayern Munich, being widely reported saying, that they're open to him moving on. And what's your understanding on this? Does this one feel real? And do you see Spurs making an official move for him?
Yeah, I do actually. The information that I've heard is that there is some talks there about the possibility that a bid's not gone in, but people around, whether it's club to intermediary or whether it's not club to club yet, that he has been discussed. So from what would be further down the line, then some of the others that I know, the coverage of Spurs is so kind of forensic and they get linked to a lot of players. in each position across the globe, but he's definitely one that I think there is a possibility in terms of what he obviously waited for that move. It didn't happen first time for him at Bayern, but he went around again. He eventually got it. Just last season, possibly from what I'm seeing, maybe a little bit of time to settle, and it's always it's always difficult to move to a new city as well, because he did seem very, very content at London. You could see Spurs being an attractive proposition for him as well. I thought when he played at Fulham, I thought he was an excellent. I thought he was a really classy, understated kind of player, and I think he could suit a Thomas Frank team. Maybe a bit of Højbjerg about him. Maybe a bit more of an elegant player, but still that kind of discipline and positional play, which some say maybe Spurs missed a bit last season.
It's interesting on that player because, as you touched upon, Mike, he is Premier League proven. I think for a lot of fans, I can't speak for all fans, of course, is that there seems to be a real emphasis for many fans, and I this is of my thinking as well, and what I want to see. I want to see the club making signings of players that do have genuine Premier League experience. If it's not Premier League experience, and international experience, players that have more been there, done it to some degree, rather than. And I mean, it's all wholeheartedly. Look, I'm a massive fan of young players. Don't get me wrong, and seeing players come through, it does feel for me particularly that this window. I think it's really important that we do see players that are going to come in and really impact the first team and elevate that first team. I think we've spent a lot of the previous few windows really buying in some prospects that we're going to hope are going to massively, in the years to come, be superstars for the club. I think we've all been surprised. I'm sure Jim will agree with 𝐷𝐵𝐺, just how quickly he's come on in the last 12 months. And I know there's real high hopes around Archie Gray and, of course, Mikey Moore. And I know we've got the youngster Oliver Bose that's come in, 16 years old, bless his heart. We hope for him. He's going to have a good start, of course, in the academy. But it does feel that, I know for a lot of fans out there, this particular window is about bringing in players that are almost ready-made, ready to really hit the ground running. And I appreciate, look, there's been a lot of links out there to a number of number sixes, as you know, Mike. In the Spurs world, there's been so many links to, different kinds of profiles and who would really be obtainable. You've had the likes of Wharton that's been linked. You've had 𝐻𝐭 𝐀𝐰𝐚𝐫𝐝 that's been linked. You've had Keisho Sano who's been linked. But it does feel this PALHINHA one, as a profile of player that has had Premier League experience, could be the right player for Tottenham. I know, again, from his age profile, he may be slightly older than what Tottenham would normally go for, but do you think it might be a case where we are actually signing the players for the now, Mike, rather than signing the players and worrying about them if they're going to be superstars in 5 years' time? I think there's the argument that we really need to sign players that are going to make that difference right here, right now to the team.
Yeah, I agree that he does seem like he does seem like a good Spurs signing at the moment. Take away what you said, there's absolutely zero resale value for him at the age of 30. But I think 30 for a player in that position is still fairly young. I don't think age would be an issue in terms of the way that he operates. And I think to get a player from Bayern Munich as well. So you look at, say, Tell, and I'd consider Tell. Well, you might say, okay, he is a first team player for Bayern Munich, but I would consider him as like a very up and coming player with potential. Whereas PALHINHA would be, I think, as pretty much kind of tried and tested as you're going to get in terms of a European signing. And to sign somebody from Bayern Munich would be, I think, would be a real coup. And it would be taking advantage of the circumstances. The fact that he might want to move to London as well. I think that I think that it would be a really shrewd signing for Spurs. It might not get on the back pages of the, when he does sign, like some other clubs and some other positions, because he's not the most glamorous. But I think it'd be a good investment.
And what about players though that we need to move on to make room for someone like PALHINHA, right? Because Spurs, we do have a bit of a congested squad, and we're talking about bringing in more midfielders, but Bentancur and Basuma in particular, hitting that last year of their contract. What have you heard in terms of the options they might have available to them if we were to sell them, and whether Spurs are at all interested in selling them, or we're planning to kind of keep them for the upcoming season?
In terms of outs, I've got to say I'm not been hearing that there's clubs knocking, banging down the door asking for either of them in what is they were first team players last season. So there's obviously been some there's been interest in Sonny, obviously, and those positions, and obviously Christian Romero as well, who you'd think would keeping him would be like almost like a new signing as well, because there has been real intense interest in him. So in terms of, I'm not hearing that anybody has kind of said their goodbyes to the rest of their teammates and are going to be leaving before the weekend, which maybe I'll be proved wrong on that, but that's just what I'm hearing at the moment.
I appreciate it, Mike. We do. Can other midfielders touch upon that subject that James brought up? I mean, two really out of the blue that we've heard across this week from different variety of sources. It'd be good to get your just take on it and whether you feel either of them really are realistic options during this window. And a player that we can't ever get away from. I don't mean that disrespectfully to him, but we always seem to veer back to this player, regardless of who the manager is. I mean, it must just be on some kind of internal club shortlist that when we're in real dire straits and thinking, okay, let's drop a shortlist. No disrespect to the players. I think on his day he's been a really good player, but Conor Gallagher is apparently been re-emerging back on Spurs' shortlist. There's been reports suggesting that Thomas Frank quite likes the player. We know Ange Postecoglou was a massive fan of Conor Gallagher during his time at the club. And there's also been suggestions, again, not sure how true they are, but good to get your take on it, that Man United midfielder Kobbie Mainoo could be potentially available for transfer this summer. And Tottenham also have got a liking to him. I mean, either of those names, Mike, have you heard anything to suggest Tottenham would be in the running for if they are available?
Well, I think Gallagher was absolutely a target. A couple of windows. It might have been maybe the window before he went to Atletico. It might have been that summer as well. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen. I'm sorry, I haven't got my notes on me for that, but I remember covering it. But he was definitely a target for Spurs. So there has been long-standing interest in him. I personally, I like him in terms of the energy that he brings, and in his area of the position, he's also got quality as well, which I don't think people always give him credit for. And I think if you got the form that he showed, kind of at Palace, or kind of when his back was against the wall against Chelsea, I think Gallagher would be a really a good signing for any Premier League player. I think Mainoo's a difficult one. Obviously he hasn't ever signed the contract that people have been kind of talking about and saying that he would. So I think I think that one could rumble on as well. United are obviously wanting to do outs, and then but like kind of Garnacho and who else? Malacia are further kind of closer to the exit door than Kobbie Mainoo. But I mean, I still can't believe in Bilbao. I think he came on in the end for about 30 seconds. But I mean, Mainoo. I mean, I saw him play for England at the Euros, and he had such a good impact on United when he came through, and he's just totally not in the running really for Ruben Amorim. So something will have to happen there. But I'm not hearing that myself. I'm not hearing that Spurs are kind of actually there for him at the moment. Other people might have that information themselves, but that hasn't come across my one yet.
Okay.
we've also only got about 5 left wingers in the squad. So looking at, we need to bolster that area. So Johan Wissa is another one who's a player who can play on the left wing. Newcastle obviously have been predominantly linked, but everyone they've been linked with this summer seems to have been pipped from under their noses. And apparently we're looking to do something similar with this. Have you had any truth in this one?
With Wissa, I'm kind of sorry. With Wissa, I was working a little bit on that today. I think there's quite a big asking price for him at Brentford, because obviously they've lost Mbeumo recently, Norgard as well. New manager there, Keith Andrews, who just what's he going to work with?
What a job he's got there, Mike. Eh? What a job he's walked into there, bless him.
I really rate Mbeumo highly, and I know he was actually linked with Spurs, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I was never getting that. I think they might have gone through a couple of years ago, and something might happen there. So
right.
So in terms of Wissa, I thought that from what I'm hearing, Newcastle are a bit further down the line in terms of kind of firming up their interest in him. But that asking price that Brentford want will be difficult for most clubs. Difficult one for the player as well, because I think his head's all over the place from what I read from one of my colleagues in the Telegraph. Sam Dean was saying that I think he's not doing pre-season camp in Portugal with Brentford because of the kind of unsettling nature of the speculation around his future. So that'll be one that'll rumble on, I'm sure, for the next few weeks.
Do you think, just out of interest, just to gauge on it, because of his work with Frank previously, I know you mentioned Newcastle have done a bit of groundwork on there, Mike, ahead of Tottenham. Do you think that gives Tottenham any chance in that race, given the fact that Frank's done some groundwork? But as Jim rightly says, we have got about 5 wingers, so it just feels like an unrealistic area Tottenham are going to be looking at. I mean, what's your gauge on that for you?
I think obviously Thomas Frank, is responsible for the fact how well he did last season, and the kind of reputation that he's built up. And the fact that these clubs are now interested in him, like Forest, I think Wolves previously as well. And I actually don't see him as a winger myself. I actually think he can play centrally, and in that respect, I think he'd be a really good kind of squad player, behind Solanke when needed. Or coming in off the flanks if needed, and that's absolutely no disrespect to the being a squad player at Spurs, because there's going to be eight extra Champions League games, and there's going to be big games after those ones where Thomas Frank's going to have to change that team because they're vulnerable games going away in the Champions League and then coming back and playing in the Premier League.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it does play out. Another area that we're quite stacked in. I feel like I'm following Jim's line now. Sorry, Jim, about this, about the stacking of Tottenham and where they are in terms of certain areas. But I want to stockpile them at the moment. We look at defensive options right now. I think Spurs have got around, 6 to 8 centre-backs. I know we've confirmed that Ashley Phillips has gone back out and I think rejoined. I want to say, is it Stoke? I think Stoke, it may very well be Stoke that he's rejoined on a season-long loan. So we wish, obviously, Ashley all the very, very best. We know, of course, in the summer, Tottenham have had Kota Takai that's come in. Again, as I mentioned at the start of the show, got real high hopes for Kota and what he's going to do. I mean, obviously the fact that Luka Vuskovic has had a very impressive first outing for Tottenham against Reading, you do wonder whether maybe Luka Vuskovic will stick around. We'll have to wait and see. But it's an area that Tottenham are very much predominantly stacked in. But maybe on the left side of their defence is where many may feel there's potential area of improvement required. That hasn't stopped seeing a number of different left-backs, centre-backs being linked with the club. I'm going to rattle through some names, Mike, and you can just tell me if you feel there's any interest in any of these players. We've had the likes of, we've had Maxim Esteve linked. That seems to have gone quiet. You mentioned Mark Gahey earlier being one of the players that Tottenham certainly have had an interest in. There was reports suggesting that in the January window. We had a deadline day bid rejected. There's been Ilya Zabani of Bournemouth, which we understand Tottenham have had a liking to. And I'm going to absolutely butcher this name, so please forgive me. I think it's Maxence. Can you give me the surname, Mike? Have I got? Do you know his surname? Lacroix. Thank you, Maxence Lacroix. I mean, out of any of these names I'm suggesting, Mike, you tell me any interest. Cody De Winter's been another one. Anyone we should be keeping our eyes on for you?
Mark Gay, definitely. I think Mark Gay wants to keep your eye on in terms of his contract situation, with it running down, which means will Steve Parish at Palace, will he have to accept an offer or risk losing him for free in 2026? I personally think he would be an excellent centre-back signing for not just Spurs but Liverpool, or if he went back to Chelsea. Or I think he's a first-class player. Somebody who I've watched a lot with for England, who is in the kind of mould of, you won't see him on the highlights doing last-ditch tackles because his positioning is just first class, and he doesn't get himself into trouble. He's an excellent defender. One that I think Spurs or others will be looking at in the last bit of the window and thinking whether something might happen there. With Romero, you talk to people close to Spurs, and Daniel's saying he's not going. Daniel's saying he's definitely not going. You hear, some sources away from the club, maybe more across Europe, saying that there is still interest there in him, and that there might be something late going on there. I think if they keep Romero, like I said earlier, I think it'd be like a new signing. I think he's an excellent. Yeah, as you guys know, you watch him every week. I think he's another one that deserves to be playing Champions League like he will be next season.
And another name that people have always said this player is very Spurs, but quite ironic that they're linked very heavily with Arsenal. But Eze's one that it will always seem to be around us as well until he makes that move somewhere, possibly Spurs. Him or Rodrigo, Mike, do you see us still going for Eze at all in particular?
No, I don't. I don't think Eze. No, not for Spurs. I would think that on kind of the style of play, data, and I love Eze, but I just don't think he's a Spurs player at the moment. And I think unfairly, sometimes he can be kind of labelled as a bit of a luxury player, and sometimes he's so good, and his demeanour is so laid back that I think sometimes to people scouting players, it might even work against him. But I think he's absolutely. I think he's brilliant, and I think he does deserve a move. I don't think he'll be Spurs this window though.
It's funny. I mean, I haven't mind me asking you, Mike. I mean, I know time's really pressing against us. The fascination with Eze is that I think, obviously, a lot of, as Jim said, a lot of Tottenham fans don't even think he's a Tottenham player. He's linked with Tottenham pretty much every window. I mean, I know there might be some kind of political nature that both Tottenham and Arsenal can't really be in for the same player, because the nature if one of them loses out, what does that look like to the club that does lose out on the player? Is there something more on this that we don't know? Because it's fascinating why Tottenham would not want to look at a player like Eze. It looks like they've obviously gone for Kudus. I mean, I can't imagine. I'd be surprised. I'm obviously looking at Gibbs White now. I'm just fascinated by the fact that it's gone quite a little bit on Eze for a lot of clubs. Do you think he will get a move this summer, or still difficult to tell?
I think it will be touch and go whether he gets a move. I think it's quite a high price. I think it's quite a high price for him. In terms of what Spurs got Kudus for, in terms of kind of the business that United have done, it's kind of in that bracket. and it's quite high. And I think it'll be touch and go whether he goes or whether he stays at Palace. I don't think. I don't think it'd be a Spurs with Arsenal as well. If they spend a lot on 𝐂𝐻𝐿, would they then also spend even more on a player on another player as well? So I'm not too sure about that one.
And we'll just speed it along a bit then, Mike, because of time. But we couldn't miss out our club captain, right? Son Heung-Min is one you'd expect would get interest from a number of clubs, if not the Premier League, but abroad. Have you heard anything about him moving on? It's a bit funny how we haven't announced the captaincies for this season as well, right? It sounds like there's Spurs might be waiting till their pre-season tour's finished before making a call on that one. But have you heard anything that signals a clearer intention to sell Son or to keep him?
I just think. I think it's Sam Wallace at the Telegraph, my colleague, did report on Saudi interest in Sonny, which, but it's been a strange market for the Saudis in terms of they haven't really hit, they never got the absolute, the huge ones like De Bruyne, yet they, re-signed Cristiano Ronaldo. So, but it's not like the early market there where players were going over like every week. But that was, but I did hear that there was some long-standing interest in Saudi. Obviously, his form, dipped off from what I saw anyway last season, and I think it'd be, whether he'd be in the team every single week again, it seems strange to say that. Would be a question of where does he figure?
Just on Sonny, I think it's a tricky one with regards to where we're at the moment. Frank, as Jim has said, has not made a decision on the captaincy. You're in a difficult decision if you do change the captain for a man that's been there for over a decade, Mike. He's won the trophy. And I just thought Frank's words have been quite interesting. It feels like there's been a real, and there's no disrespect when I say this, I feel there's been much more kind of, how do I word this without coming across wrong? It feels like there's been kind of, he's speaking about Romero, feels like it's kind of really like he's an important player. We want him to stay. And I'm not suggesting that he hasn't said that about Sonny, but it just feels like there's been a lot more kind of open to movement with Sonny in terms of what's been said so far in this situation. But the fact that he's been at the club for 10 years, there's no confirmation on the captaincy. But the fact that we're even having this conversation, Mike, that there's no definitive confirmation on the captain itself, that just puts his future in immediate doubt, doesn't it? Because we haven't got the confirmation. He's carrying on, right? So there is something here. There is something here, right? There is something going on. It feels that way.
Well, if he isn't, there might be the case where if he isn't going to play every week, would he still be the captain? Because he wouldn't be doing the coin toss and whatever, and there would need to be somebody who is on the pitch every week. So there might be that in play. But I am absolutely, I totally agree that there's something to be talked about and asked when the captaincy hasn't been issued yet. I remember a lot. There were Spurs stories on the captaincy. I can't remember. I think when Gallas lost the captaincy at Arsenal, somebody else lost the captaincy at Spurs. I can't remember that year anyway. But there's always kind of reporting and debate around it. And I think Sonny's at a real kind of part of his career where those questions are going to really be raging until like his future is absolutely certain, on September the 1st.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm going to hand back to Jim because I know, like I say, whilst I know, I've got to say out there, I know everybody is craving signings coming in. I know many people want that market to move. We also at the same time, to hand back to you, that there is an element where players have to go out. I think we've got about We've got that 40,
Well, it's
40-man squad here. Jim.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's just endless. It always seems to come up with the wingers, doesn't it? Because we've got Richarlison, Hill, Solomon, Moore, Son, Odegaard. Oh my God! And we're linked to Gibbs White, who could play on the left as well, and Eze, who could play on the left. It's endless. It's relentless. But of those, I think some are more leaning towards going than staying, right? And some have got more likely sell-on value. Richarlison was a major one that we heard a 50 million link around 50 million euros to him. Him in particular, do you see Richarlison leaving? Have you heard that, if that interest's true? And then on the others, there were some more fringe ones in Hill and Solomon, but also Mikey Moore going out on loan. Any of those had anything prevalent going on from your knowledge, Mike?
Nothing imminent, but I can definitely see. I can see Richarlison, because there has been Saudi bids for him before in previous windows. I think he's been linked with Everton because I think they still love him there because he's a real club man wherever he is. Really, he loves winding up rivals. And I quite like him as a player. Actually, I think he would give something to any team. And out of those players, I can see Mikey Moore being absolutely top of the loan short lists for any EFL team. But getting them is difficult. Lancashire's been difficult to get. I don't know whether he eventually got one last season, but I know that the EFL clubs that I was talking to were all saying we'd have him, we'd definitely have him, but he's a difficult one to get. But Mikey Moore, I think he would. I could see him having a good championship push to get to the Premier League that way.
I just wondered Ryan Mason coming in, Jim. I mean, that might be obviously, of course, West Bromwich Albion, where Ryan Mason is going to maybe weave his magic. Look at someone like Lancashire, as you touched upon, Mike, there being a player of interest. Some of the younger players that are around Tottenham, Mikey Moore, dare I say, it just feels that as an opportunity there. But we shall see. Jim, I'll hand back over to you to close us.
Yeah, well, as you know, Mike, we have the second longest serving manager in the Premier League. The only one, I believe, never to be sacked. So that kind of puts him top of the charts and something, right? But what do you think it will be his own target, but also the expectations of where Frank needs to finish this year, not just in the league, but across, competitions as a whole, in terms of, do you think he needs to go deep into any particular cups? And then you have to sign it off with the ultimate question of how many more senior signings are Spurs going to make this window?
With Frank, I think he's a really good choice. I think, like I said, to get to the knockout rounds of the Champions League, I think would be seen as positive. I think top 8 would be seen as positive. And a cup run, domestic cup run, would be what Spurs, to go to Wembley. All Spurs fans would love that as well. So I think if he could get that in and of itself doesn't sound great, does it? It sounds a bit like, maybe like what Aston Villa did last season. But I do think that would be progress. And I think if as a character, I think he's got a lot of integrity. And I think if he shows that, the way he presents himself, puts together a good team, and I think importantly finishes the season strongly. So there's a bit of people that see the potential there to maybe have a little dart at it the season after. Then I think that's success for him. And I think 2 to 3 first team signings.
More? Is that more? Like 2 to 3 more.
Is that enough for you guys? Would you be happy or unhappy with that?
I think there's a barometer of your popularity that goes up the more you say amongst the fan base, right? So I think you just slap down and just say Spurs are going to sign 6. Just let the aggregators clip you up.
What you got to know? Mike's got to come back here in January, so Mike's got to be careful what he does predict. We'll be asking him in January what he made of it. So if we're depending on where we are, Jim, and it'll probably be you long time here with Mike in January, we'll have to feed back what that information has been. But I think it will come down to Mike. You know, I think the Jim agrees. It'll be the quality of what they brought in. I think that'll be the key. If it's Morgan Gibbs White plus another 2 quality additions. I mean, I don't think Tottenham are that far away from being really, really competitive in the league. I think, you know, the key in this window, as I've said kind of in the early part of the show, is I think we really just need to ensure the players that we're bringing in are genuine, proven Premier League or international-based players that have got that experience that are going to help the club and elevate the first team. I think, you know, gone are the days where I think fans that we all like signings, but there's no point, I've said this before, bringing in 6, 7 players that are squad fillers. I think we want to see players that are going to come in and genuinely take the first team up a few levels. And I think if you're going to bring in Morgan Gibbs White plus another couple of players that are going to move that dial, I can't speak for everyone because I don't want to upset everyone, but I think the majority of us would be happy, Jim. And listen, you're a match game fan as well. I think we'd be quite happy.
Yeah, I think we would. Like you say, it's about Spurs. I think I don't like using the word behaving, but that's what's often used. Like just in the transfer window, showing that level of like competitiveness that rivals the clubs we want to be competing with. And if Liverpool are slapping down huge transfer fees for likes of Wirtz, and I know we're not their level, that's a journey to get to there that would take a number of years, but you still want to be on par doing what the likes of Arsenal and Chelsea are doing in this window, who are similar revenue size clubs. And it'd just be nice for us to go, right, yeah, we did sign 3 established players like they would. And then we layered those young, exciting prospects underneath them as future opportunities for the club, and that's what we want to see. It's just rather than Spurs doing what we've done before, you get 1 and then you get a couple of kids. We're saying let's get 3 and then go get those prospects as well. So well, let's see.
I agree. I feel like at the moment, I know it sounds awful, I feel like I'm having to apologise to the Spurs fans, but there's over nearly 9,000 that are watching us live. I promise you, me and Jim will be loving coming on here, asking the wonderful, astute journalists like the wonderful Mike McGrath about all the signings that we're making and how many more that we're so excited to come in through the door. But we can't make things up that just simply aren't true. We can only ask Mike about what appears to be around the Spurs community and, you know, again, getting his opinion on it. And Mike, I think that's why you're always, you know, are very well reputable, because you do give us such detailed information as to what is going on. There's no real misreporting from, I think, what we've seen from you so far covering Tottenham and a lot of clubs around. And I know you'll be one of the very important people that we'll need to follow across the summer. So where can people find the wonderful work you do, Mike? Because we'll certainly be checking you out. And we're looking forward to welcoming you back in January, where we're talking hopefully about Tottenham being right at that top of that league. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, so I'm a McGrath Mike is my Twitter handle, and obviously the Telegraph football website. That's where we have all our journalists do all our work, and that's all published on there. So it's going to get busy. I think next few weeks there's going to be plenty happening at Spurs and beyond.
God, that's a cliffhanger, might leave us on. Dun, 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 dun. It's going to be busy next week. Right, okay. Jim, get that diary fully blocked out. Mike, it's an absolute pleasure. Look, we know how busy it is, and I think people maybe underestimate how busy it is during the transfer window for you as a journalist or what is going on in your world. So I want to, as always, say a massive, massive thank you. I think we had you on the last 3-4 years, and you always make the time for us. Thank you so much, Mike. We really, really do appreciate it.
No problem, Ricky. Thanks for having me on. Cheers, Jim.
You've been a star, Jim. Thank you so much, Jim. Of course, over at the 𝐂𝐳𝐭 Spurs pod. Well, there you go. That is the latest with Spurs in the window. We are having to be kept waiting over Morgan Gibbs White. We are waiting to see if Tottenham will move apparently now. We are waiting to see what Spurs do next. I can guarantee you one thing. When the wait is over, we'll be there on the other side to take you through it. From myself, from the wonderful Jim at 𝐂𝐳𝐭 Spurs, from the brilliant Mike McGrath, we have been the Last Word on Spurs. Please keep safe, keep well. And as always, come on, you Spurs.